ਚਕਦੇ ਟੀਵੀ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦਵਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਪਿਆਰ ਤੇ ਸਤਿਕਾਰ ਭਰੀ ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ। ਜਿਵੇਂ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਭ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਪੀਸੀ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਯਾਨੀ ਕਿ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰੈਸਿਵ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੀਆਂ ਚੋਣਾਂ 5 ਸਤੰਬਰ ਨੂੰ ਆਨਲਾਈਨ ਹੋਣਗੀਆਂ, ਤਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਚੋਣਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਿਕ ਮੈਕਾਈਵਰ, ਜਿਮ ਪ੍ਰੈਂਟਿਸ ਤੇ ਥਾਮਸ ਲਿਵਕਜ਼ੁਕ ਪੀਸੀ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰਧਾਨਗੀ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਦੂਜੇ ਦੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਹਨ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਚੋਣਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਤੀਜੇ ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਹੱਕ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਣਗੇ ਉਹੀ ਐਲਬਰਟਾ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰ ਯਾਨੀ ਕਿ ਮੁੱਖ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਦੇ ਅਹੁਦੇ 'ਤੇ ਵੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਸਮੇਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੇਖਣ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲਣਗੇ। ਜਿਵੇਂ ਕਿ ਕੱਲ੍ਹ ਜਿਮ ਪ੍ਰੈਂਟਿਸ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੌਜੂਦ ਸੀ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਂਝੇ ਕੀਤੇ ਸੀ। ਅੱਜ ਵਾਅਦੇ ਦੇ ਮੁਤਾਬਿਕ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਪੀਸੀ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰਧਾਨਗੀ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਖੜੇ ਉਮੀਦਵਾਰ ਰਿਕ ਮੈਕਾਈਵਰ, ਜੋ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਐਲਬਰਟਾ ਦੇ ਇਨਫਰਾਸਟਰਕਚਰ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਵੀ ਹਨ, ਸ਼ੋਅ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ਾਮਿਲ ਹੋਣਗੇ। ਪਰ ਇਸ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਚੱਲਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਫੇਅਰਮਾਉਂਟ ਪੈਲੇਜ਼ਰ ਹੋਟਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਜਿੱਥੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸੰਬੋਧਨ ਕਰਦਿਆਂ ਹੋਇਆਂ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਨੀਤੀਆਂ ਬਾਰੇ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਦਿੱਤੀ। ਆਓ ਫਿਰ ਸੁਣਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਪਟਾਰੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਐਲਬਰਟਾ ਦੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਕੀ ਕੁਛ ਹੈ।
First, the only way you can score a goal is to be on the ice, full stop. And while I freely admit that our team, particularly our team captain, occasionally scored on our own net or made a series of bad plays, we've also done some good things. Alberta is still the envy of our nation on the big things that matter. We are the leader on job creation. Alberta is the leader in economic growth and contributions per capita on economic growth for the whole country of Canada. We have a fabulous education system, amongst the best in the world, and our healthcare system, while needing improvements, is in many ways the envy of the nation. I stand behind those accomplishments as only someone who has been on the ice can. You can't claim credit for goals if you're sitting in the stands, and you don't pick the captain of your team from those sitting in the stands or those watching the game on television. And on the charge that I sat idly by, I point to the one obvious thing that I had responsibility for and for which I certainly did something. When I became infrastructure minister and discovered that the Premier's Sky Palace was moving ahead, I killed it. I killed it without ceremony, and I killed it dead. I, as the Auditor General said in his report, converted it from living space to meeting space. Auditor General's words, black and white. I did that in the most economical way and dealt with the situation that was handed to me. No one could have stopped the Sky Palace from the stands or from watching on TV. I was on the ice and I made the defensive play. Now, let me turn to some matters of fiscal and economic policy. This is, after all, the Economic Club of Canada. A few weeks back, I made what I called a pledge to taxpayers. It contains 3 promises. First, I will return Alberta to straightforward, transparent, and honest budget reporting that accounts for all spending and all revenues, because we cannot have a proper debate about what the budget does if we cannot even agree on what the budget says. So, I will create an all-party committee to seek agreement on the budget presentation, so we can have that more important debate on what the budget does. Second, I will balance the consolidated budget in 3 years or less. 0 and 3 has a nice ring to it, don't you think? And I see no reason why, with record revenues, that Alberta cannot balance its budget in 3 years or less. And if that means we have to cut some spending to get there, well, they didn't call me Dr. No when I was at City Council for nothing, and I will not be afraid to control spending as Premier. Third, I will introduce a legislated plan to eliminate the debt. A man who many consider to be Alberta's greatest Premier, Ralph Klein, not only said he would eliminate the deficit and then the debt, he put those promises into law. It was the right thing to do then, and it's the right thing to do now. I've also made 3 commitments on taxes. First, I will maintain Alberta's tax advantage by maintaining Alberta's single rate tax. Alberta has the best tax system in Canada, and I do not intend to change that. Second, and you've heard this before, the only way taxes are going is down. This is another great principle from Alberta's great Premier Ralph Klein, and it is another one of his principles that I intend to copy. Third, when we are able to afford it, I will cut taxes for hardworking Alberta families with children. Alberta's tax system is actually one of the last to recognize the value of children to all taxpayers. And that is something I will fix when we can afford it by introducing tax breaks for families with kids. The other piece of the puzzle for a prosperous Alberta future is market access for our resources: agriculture, forestry, tourism, oil and gas. Alberta is the economic engine of Canada due to these endowments, and we need to work to get better access to markets for our products. And that means getting done what some people call impossible deals with Aboriginal groups. Well, I've done a number of impossible deals with Aboriginal groups, and I know what it takes to get them done. These include the deal with the Stoney Nation to get approval to widen Highway 1A west of Cochrane. That deal was outstanding for 30 years until I became Transportation Minister and completed that negotiation. The deal with the Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation to get the last 20 miles of Highway 43 widened. When I was Transportation Minister, we completed that deal that seemed impossible. And if you drive that road right now, you can witness the construction of that widening. And it includes the deal that eluded governments for 60 years, almost 60 years, until I was able to get an agreement with our good friends and neighbors, the Tsuut'ina Nation, a pattern of completing so-called impossible deals with Aboriginal people that I will take forward to the pipeline and energy files, the biggest economic issues that face our province. Getting our fiscal house in order, keeping taxes low, market access for our resources. These are the three keys to keeping Alberta and Albertans prosperous. I'll end today with the same words with which I ended my launch speech. Over the course of this campaign, I talked every day on how I intend to bring common sense and new thinking to replace the establishment thinking. For that really is the question at the heart of this campaign. Do you want more establishment thinking, or do you think it's time for some common sense, new thinking? Do you want same old, or do you think it's time for some real change? I think I know what my bosses think, and I think I know what you might think. And if you agree, I ask for your support to make me the next leader of the Progressive Conservative Association of Alberta and the next Premier of the greatest place to live on earth, Alberta.
ਇਕਨੋਮਿਕ ਕਲੱਬ ਆਫ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਨੂੰ ਸੰਬੋਧਨ ਕਰਦਿਆਂ ਹੋਇਆਂ ਰਿਕ ਮੈਕਆਈਵਰ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਆਪ ਦੀਆਂ ਕੁਝ ਬਹੁਤ ਮਹੱਤਵਪੂਰਨ ਨੀਤੀਆਂ ਬਾਰੇ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਗਈ। ਆਪਣੇ ਬਿਆਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਜੇਕਰ ਉਹ ਐਲਬਰਟਾ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰ ਬਣਦੇ ਹਨ ਤਾਂ ਅਸੈਂਬਲੀ ਨੂੰ ਵਧੀਆ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਉਹ ਸਖਤ ਨਿਯਮਾਂ ਦਾ ਗਠਨ ਕਰਨਗੇ, ਜਿਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਵਾਧੂ ਖਰਚੇ 'ਤੇ ਨਕੇਲ ਪਾਉਣਾ ਮੁੱਖ ਮੁੱਦਾ ਹੋਵੇਗਾ। ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਐਲਬਰਟਾ ਵਾਸੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਟੈਕਸ ਦਾ ਵਾਧੂ ਭਾਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਾਇਆ ਜਾਵੇਗਾ, ਸਗੋਂ ਟੈਕਸ ਨੂੰ ਘਟਾਉਣ 'ਤੇ ਤਰਜੀਹ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਜਾਵੇਗੀ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਮੁਤਾਬਿਕ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਮਕਸਦ ਐਲਬਰਟਾ ਦੇ ਭੰਡਾਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅੰਤਰਰਾਸ਼ਟਰੀ ਬਾਜ਼ਾਰ ਤੱਕ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਜਾਣਾ ਹੋਵੇਗਾ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਐਲਬਰਟਾ ਦੇ ਤੇਲ ਭੰਡਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਅੰਤਰਰਾਸ਼ਟਰੀ ਬਾਜ਼ਾਰ ਤੱਕ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਜਾਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਜੋ ਤੇਲ ਪਾਈਪਲਾਈਨ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਹੈ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਿਰਮਾਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਗਵਾਂਢੀ ਸੂਬਿਆਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਸਰਕਾਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਕੰਮ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇਗਾ। ਆਪਣੇ ਭਾਸ਼ਣ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਵੀ ਐਬੋਰੀਜਨਲ ਯਾਨੀ ਕਿ ਮੂਲ ਵਾਸੀ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਲੰਬੇ ਸਮੇਂ ਤੋਂ ਠੰਡੇ ਬਸਤੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਏ ਮੁੱਦਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਨੇਪਰੇ ਚੜ੍ਹਿਆ ਹੈ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਲੀਲਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਸੂਬੇ ਦੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਾਥ ਦੇਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਐਲਬਰਟਾ ਹੋਰ ਤਰੱਕੀ ਕਰ ਸਕੇ। ਇਸੇ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਇੱਕ ਛੋਟਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਅਤੇ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਰਿਕ ਨਾਲ ਕੀਤੇ ਗਏ ਸਵਾਲ ਜਵਾਬ ਦਾ ਦੌਰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਫਿਰ ਹਾਜ਼ਰ ਹੋਵਾਂਗੇ। ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਸਾਰੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫਿਰ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰਭਾਵੀ ਭਾਸ਼ਣ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਰਿਕ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਮੌਜੂਦ ਆਮ ਐਲਬਰਟਾ ਵਾਸੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਸਵਾਲਾਂ ਦਾ ਜਵਾਬ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਗਏ। ਆਓ ਸੁਣਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਸਵਾਲ ਜਵਾਬ ਦਾ ਇਹ ਦੌਰ।
Okay, well, thank you. The only time I'm really sure I'm talking about what you're interested in is when you ask me a question. So while I just tried to talk about what you're interested in, let's actually get a little more direct. If you have some questions, I'm happy to try to field them for you. Okay. Thank you. Okay, Meb?
Let me start, Rick. I think I am honored that you are running to take the party for the next future generation. I think I've known you for the last 30 years and you've done a great job, right, from your beginning to now. My question to you is, since you've been through the ups and downs of industry and the grocery business and the political aspect of it, can you tell us how do you plan to move forward with this temporary foreign worker program with the federal government?
Sure. Temporary foreign worker program. And for those that don't know, for years, Meb was selling eggs while I was selling bacon, right? Fact. He asked about temporary foreign workers. I've taken a very strong position on this. I have actually talked to Minister Kenny and people in the federal government on this, and I have said that should I become Premier, I will fight to get Alberta control over the temporary foreign worker program. Currently, Quebec has control over the temporary foreign worker program for cultural reasons. Alberta needs and ought to have control over the temporary foreign worker program for economic reasons. All over this province, there's businesses that are going to suffer or go out of business if we cannot get the labor we need to keep them open. There's hotels that will close. If you can't get somebody to wash the dishes, make the beds, and clean the floors, then all the high-priced help goes home too. All the waiters and waitresses, the front desk staff, the lawyers and accountants and the managers all lose their jobs too if the hotel closes. There's car washes in Edmonton that'll close. They're already closing now for certain days of the week when they can't get staff. There's feedlots that won't be able to feed and water their cattle. And cattle are a little bit like us. They need feeding and watering every day. And so and it goes to all sectors of the economy. It goes to the oil patch. It goes to the service industry. There's people with 6 restaurants. They're going to close 3 of them if they can't get the temporary foreign workers. And I will be very forceful and aggressive with the federal government should I become Premier to get us control of that so that Alberta companies can get the labor to employ Albertans, to pay taxes, to grow our economy. Yes?
Rick, I've heard it said by some that the opposition would have an easier job if your opponent won than if you won. Do you have any take on where we're at with the opposition?
You know what? The opposition's job is to oppose, and bless them for that. That's their job. But I'll say this, that I think the new Premier needs to get right to work. I think waiting for a by-election will not be helpful. There's only 18 months between the end of this contest and the next election. Spending several of those months on a by-election I don't think is going to be as productive as it can be. And of course, just according to what the taxpayers say, I might have less awkward explanations to make. Yes?
You spoke of your successes with Ric McIver. What would you say, why do you think you're successful where other people fail?
Because I listen. No, you know what? It's one of the central themes of my campaign. 4.1 million Albertans will be the bosses. I don't know everything. If you want to get someone to agree with you on a difficult issue, you actually have to take the time to listen and understand them, to actually acknowledge their interests and their needs, to assure the other party that you will recognize their interests and their needs, and then and then at that point, and only at that point, can you look for the common interests. And the other thing is, I like people. Certain groups of people won't do business with you no matter how sweet the deal is unless they actually like you and you like them. I kind of like people. Yes.
If we could go back to the infrastructure question again, and you know this well better than any of us, having had that responsibility, we've fallen behind on our infrastructure, moving down the region during the session, obviously we couldn't afford to, but we've had over 100,000 people come into the province now this year. How do we build the infrastructure that we need to build and still keep a surplus?
How do we build the infrastructure and keep a surplus? Well, and you're right, I have had direct experience at that. One of the things that I think qualifies me for the job I'm currently applying for. But to answer your question, we need to be disciplined. The first thing is we need to make sure when we spend money, we only spend it for the purpose of serving Albertans and not for our own personal comfort. I think we need to be creative. I think we need to bring the private sector in where we can. I know there's developers that have talked to me saying that if we'd give them the permission, they would actually build schools, pay for all or part of schools in new neighborhoods, and we need to coordinate those efforts with school boards and let them do that. I think we need to make proper use of the P3 contracts. The government's done a pretty good job on that, but I think we need to do that. And you know, I will say this, that every P3 contract needs to be judged on its own merit. There are those that say P3 is a panacea and the answer to everything, and in my opinion, they're wrong. There are those people that say P3 contracts are the worst thing in the world, and I believe those people are wrong. I think every P3 contract needs to be judged on its own merits. I think we need to so we need to attract that international capital and give it an opportunity to work, because the one thing that I do believe is that every municipality is behind on infrastructure. Every province is behind on infrastructure, and even the government of Canada would say they're behind on infrastructure. So it's not a problem that's easily going to go away, but we will make the best progress on it if we're disciplined, if we pay for as much as we can with cash, and if we talk to Albertans in plain language when we do have to borrow money, to make sure there's public support for that. A little like a family does when you buy a home. If you're going to do that, for example, at the end of this fiscal year, we ought to be able to say to Albertans, if we borrow $2.1 billion that we built for that, they got exactly these schools, exactly these hospitals, exactly these kilometers of roads and these seniors' beds. And at the end, and then I think we should do what families do, is schedule a mortgage burning party. So somewhere between 15 and 25 years after that, we can say, we built these schools, they're paid for, and they're still good for another 50 or 75 years. We built these hospitals, they're still good for another 50 or 75 years. We built these roads, there's another 10 or 20 years before they need repaving. So you got a good job, you could afford it, and I think that's the way I think we need to talk to the public if we want to keep their support. And we have to have a plan to pay it back that's credible. So I look forward to your advice on that too. Yes.
How will you work with Premier Clark to meet the conditions for British Columbia?
How will I work with Premier Clark? Closely and carefully and with respect, and I will listen and find out what British Columbia's legitimate interests are, and I will take to the table Alberta's legitimate interests, and we will look for the common ground. And again, I present my track record of getting impossible deals done. I mentioned the 3 Aboriginal deals, but I will also, because you asked for this, I'll highlight my time on City Council, where I negotiated the last major annexation with Rocky View, and that went on for a number of years, where everybody said, that is a deal you will never do. You will have to go to court. You'll have to go to the Municipal Government Board. Year and a half after I joined the negotiating committee, we shook hands. I guess I will take the attitude that I've had through a complete, not a lucky punch, but a pattern of completing impossible deals. I will take to British Columbia and try to make another impossible deal using the weapons of respect, common interests, understanding, listening. Yes.
Dan actually made a comment the other day, that all 3 of the party candidates were not making any comments to each city of the cities, north and south, on how they will try to move people along in the infrastructure front. How do you plan to play a balanced role between the 2 cities and trying to make sure that every Albertan is served in the proper fashion?
Well, and you know what? I guess I'll be, again, with respect and openness, and you know what? Frankly, it's Mayor Nenchi's job to advocate for more for the city. So if he's complaining because he wants more, I call that him doing his job right. I'm not sure how else you can describe it. The mayor's job is to beat up the province for every nickel they can get out of it. And yesterday and this morning is an example of the mayor doing his job right. So I don't have a problem with that, and I look forward to working with him and Mayor Iveson and the mayors, Reeves, and councillors from the other 340-odd municipalities in Alberta to help them get what they need to. But we'll do it at the rate we can afford, and we'll do it with openness and honesty. Thank you.
Well, I just want to take this time to thank Ric for coming out, and I'm sure dealing with what is a very hectic schedule this last week, to come and address our members and guests today. We've really appreciated having you, and thanks to all your team. They've been lovely to work with. So for those of you who joined us for this event, we're so glad to have hosted you, and we look forward to seeing you more this season. So make sure you leave us your business cards so we can stay connected and let you know what's coming up. Have a great day.
ਰਿਕ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛੇ ਗਏ ਸਵਾਲਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਾਫੀ ਮੁੱਦੇ ਛਿੜੇ ਗਏ, ਜਿਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਗਵਾਂਢੀ ਸੂਬਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਰਿਸ਼ਤੇ, ਟੈਂਪਰੇਰੀ ਫੋਰਨ ਵਰਕਰਸ, ਬਾਈ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨਸ ਅਤੇ ਪਬਲਿਕ ਸੈਕਟਰ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਯੋਗਦਾਨ ਬਾਰੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਹੋਈ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਸਵਾਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਵਾਬ ਦਿੰਦਿਆਂ ਰਿਕ ਮੈਕਾਈਵਰ ਨੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਟੈਂਪਰੇਰੀ ਫੋਰਨ ਵਰਕਰ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਵੱਡਾ ਮੁੱਦਾ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਇਸ ਲਈ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਨਾਲ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਹੈ। ਜੇ ਉਹ ਸੂਬੇ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰ ਬਣਦੇ ਹਨ ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਕੇ ਐਲਬਰਟਾ ਨੂੰ ਬਣਦਾ ਹੱਕ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਦਿਵਾਉਣਗੇ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੀਆਂ ਆਮ ਚੋਣਾਂ 2016 ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ ਹੋਣਗੀਆਂ। ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਚੋਣਾਂ ਕਰਵਾ ਕੇ ਉਹ ਐਲਬਰਟਾ ਵਾਸੀਆਂ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਭਰੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਟੈਕਸ ਦੀ ਰਾਸ਼ੀ ਨੂੰ ਖਰਾਬ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ। ਇਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਪਾਈਪਲਾਈਨ ਬਾਰੇ ਪੁੱਛੇ ਜਾਏ ਸਵਾਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਜਵਾਬ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਗਵਾਂਢੀ ਸੂਬੇ ਯਾਨੀ ਕਿ ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਪੂਰੇ ਸਤਿਕਾਰ ਅਤੇ ਦੋਨੋਂ ਪੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ ਫਾਇਦੇ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਕੇ ਕੋਈ ਪੱਕਾ ਹੱਲ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਕੱਢਣਗੇ। ਅਜਿਹੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਸਵਾਲਾਂ ਦਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਬੜੀ ਸਮਝਦਾਰੀ ਨਾਲ ਜਵਾਬ ਦਿੱਤਾ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਜਵਾਬਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਉਸਾਰੂ ਸੋਚ ਅਤੇ ਅਗਾਂਹ ਵਧੂ ਨੀਤੀਆਂ ਦੀ ਝਲਕ ਵਿਖਾਈ ਦਿੱਤੀ। ਫਿਲਹਾਲ ਇੱਥੇ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਇੱਕ ਛੋਟਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ, ਅਤੇ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਮਿਲਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਅਤੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਰਿਕ ਮੈਕਾਈਵਰ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ।
ਬੈਸਟ ਬਾਏ ਫਰਨੀਚਰ ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੁਝ ਅਨੋਖਾ ਸੋਚਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਵੱਖਰਾ ਬਣਾਉਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਸੁਪਨਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਮਹਿਲ ਲਈ ਫਰਨੀਚਰ ਦੀ ਇੱਕ ਅਜਿਹੀ ਕਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਜੋ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕਿਤੇ ਹੋਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਿਲੇਗੀ। ਸ਼ਾਨਦਾਰ, ਮਜ਼ਬੂਤ ਤੇ ਆਰਾਮਦਾਇਕ ਫਰਨੀਚਰ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਦੇ ਆਰਾਮਦਾਇਕ ਪਲਾਂ ਲਈ। Best Buy Furniture, the perfect homemaker. Finance available for 6 months with 0% interest. Call 403-250-6661. 403-250-6661.
ਸਾਰੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫਿਰ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਵਾਅਦੇ ਦੇ ਮੁਤਾਬਿਕ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਸ਼ੋਅ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੇ ਨੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰੈਸਿਵ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੇ ਅੰਦਰੂਨੀ ਚੋਣਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੀਡੈਂਟਸ਼ਿਪ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਖੜੇ ਕੈਲਗਰੀ ਹੇਜ਼ ਤੋਂ MLA ਅਤੇ ਅਲਬਰਟਾ ਦੇ ਇਨਫਰਾਸਟਰਕਚਰ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਰਿਕ ਮੈਕਾਈਵਰ, ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੈਲਗਰੀ ਦੇ ਜਾਣੇ ਮਾਣੇ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸਮੈਨ ਅਤੇ ਰਾਜਨੀਤਿਕ ਜਾਣਕਾਰ ਦਵਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਧੂਰ ਹੋਣਗੇ, ਅਤੇ ਮੁੱਖ ਸਵਾਲ ਜਵਾਬ ਦਾ ਦੌਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੋਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿਚਾਲੇ ਹੀ ਹੋਵੇਗਾ। ਸਾਰੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ ਜੀ। ਅੱਜ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਮੌਜੂਦ ਨੇ ਕੈਲਗਰੀ ਤੋਂ MLA ਅਤੇ ਐਲਬਰਟਾ ਦੇ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਇਨਫਰਾਸਟਰਕਚਰ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ, ਅਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਨੇ ਕੈਲਗਰੀ ਦੇ ਜਾਣੇ ਮਾਣੇ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸਮੈਨ ਅਤੇ ਰਾਜਨੀਤਿਕ ਜਾਣਕਾਰ ਦਵਿੰਦਰ ਧੂਰ ਜੀ। ਅਤੇ ਸ਼ੁਰੂਆਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਅੱਜ ਰਿਕ ਮੈਕਾਈਵਰ ਜੀ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਦਾ ਦੌਰ। Hello Rick, welcome to our show and very thank you.
Very good to be here, Devinder ji.
Yeah, thank you sir. ਤੇ ਦਵਿੰਦਰ ਜੀ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਵੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਬਹੁਤ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ।
Thank you.
ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੋ ਅੱਜ।
Yeah.
So let's start about your campaign. How it was?
Well, it's been good. It's the campaigns all kind of take on a life of their own, but we've worked hard. We've traveled the province. I've met a lot of Albertans, learned a lot about what's important to them, and I feel good. One of the goals that I had at the beginning, I think I've achieved, is that when it comes time to vote, there's a clear choice for the Albertans between the candidates. And I think we have come to that place now where there's a clear decision to be made, and that makes me happy.
When the campaign started, most of us were thinking that campaign will be boring, right? And that's how the party wanted to be. But a lot of things came up. Can you tell us that, you came up, well, from the last few days, you were very active. You think it's a little too late?
Oh, I was active the whole time. And I would say to you that, and we'll find out whether it's too late or whether it's enough or not when the voting time comes, but I have to tell you, I was active the whole time. The only thing that's happened in the last few days, frankly, is the media finally got interested. I've been talking about policies since day one. I mean, on day one of the campaign, I said things like, senior members of my campaign team will not be eligible for government contracts. Almost nobody's reported it till this week. I said to people that lobby government will not be eligible for contracts. I said that the chief of staff of the premier will not make more than the premier to control those public sector wages. I said controlling expenses is important and talked about how my expense reports were boring, and I've been saying it for weeks and months, but it seems like it was summer. It was summer, so in fairness. The public's more engaged now. September comes, and they're really paying attention to politics more than they were on those hot, sunny days in July and August.
You were very vocal that you want to have the other candidates to join you in the debates. You want to debate some issues.
Yes.
I think you even sent a request to the party that you want to debate certain issues.
Yes.
But didn't happen.
Not all the candidates. I'm pretty sure that, in fairness, Thomas Lukaszuk was pretty open to debates and actually was pretty active, and somehow Mr. Prentice didn't seem to want to do that.
Sure. Let me ask you, debates are very important, and which give you opportunity to ask the questions to the other contenders. What question you want to ask to Mr. Prentice?
Well, the ones that I've actually asked, I mean, for example, the one policy that I talked about today that I said if I get elected premier, that senior campaign members of my campaign team and companies they own will not be eligible for government contracts. That's something I've said up till now, and Mr. Prentice hasn't agreed to that, and I have to wonder why. Another question that I actually did ask him once in a forum that he didn't answer, although I think he has since, was because, listen, I'm going to be with the party. I'm committed to Albertans. No matter what happens in this campaign, I'm going to run in the next election and run as a PC. And I'm not sure, I think from Mr. Prentice has said, I'm not sure he's going to run at all or even stick around at all if he doesn't get the result he wants in this thing. So again, there's another clear choice for Albertans between me, someone that's committed to Alberta and committed to our party and our government, and someone that's only sticking around if he gets the result he wants. I think that's an important distinction that I'm happy that Albertans will know.
And when we talk about the policy, let's start from the education. Mr. Prentice came up with the policy that he wants to build extra 50 schools on the top of 50 schools were promised earlier by the Premier, and renovate about 70 schools. As we know, that single school hasn't built yet.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, we know this. We need the schools. I've heard from the school board some that say we need up to 250 schools over the next 10 years, and that number may be high, may be low, may be right. But the fact is, making a promise during an election of 50 schools, which is potentially an expenditure of about $2 billion, I said this during the campaign, I don't want to be the candy man. I want to be the guy that gets the schools built. But former Premier Redford made promises like that, and they didn't get kept on time. And I think Albertans want a more reasonable promise that'll be kept. And that's the way I've tried to conduct my campaign, making a reason. And I have said, if I'm Premier, we'll sit down with the school boards, the teachers, the parents. We'll talk about how many schools need to be built. We'll talk about when they need to be built, and then we'll put together an actual plan to build them. But making a promise for $2 billion, or that could cost $2 billion, so you can get out of a room with applause, is not a way to run a government. And it's not the way that I intend to run the government should I become leader.
And when it comes to healthcare, I think he wants to decentralize the health board again. We spend a lot of money, we spend a lot of resources to centralize it. Now, you think it'll be a good use of the money when we want to decentralize and start it over again?
Well, respectfully, the other candidate talked about essentially reformulating the super board, which the government got rid of not like because he talked about a blue ribbon panel of Albertans, and what I've said is that no, that didn't work the first time. We need to actually get the decision making closer to where the patients and the doctors and nurses and the technicians meet. Because what I've seen going around Alberta is that they tell me decision makers don't get through the facilities. We got clinics and hospitals that need new equipment, that have a leaky roof, and they haven't got a decision maker to come through the door. And the employees even have some great ideas about we have too many staff in this part and too few there, so why don't we make adjustments? We could probably save some money and give better service, and they're just not getting the attention from the decision makers. So now with healthcare, let me be clear. I don't have all the answers. I know that people need to pay for healthcare with their healthcare card and not their credit card. That's an important principle. But I've also said there's other provinces in Canada that are getting better value for the money than Alberta is. And I said it's time for us to put our pride in our pocket, admit some other people are doing better at delivering health care, and take their ideas and apply them in Alberta. And again, let me repeat, when it comes to health care, I do not have all the answers. I'm going to have to listen.
And I think when we talk about the major cities like Edmonton and Calgary, the mayor of Calgary came forward and said that none of you, like all three of candidates, didn't say much about how you're going to tackle those issues. They're looking for a city charter. They want to negotiate the city charter, want more powers. And I don't know it in terms of taxes or what kind of they want to negotiate. And those, let's say before going to the negotiation, even I think the communication was missing. Municipal Affairs Minister was not even in good terms to talk to the mayor at that time. You were in the city, you know the major problems.
It was,
yeah.
And I took the time to meet with Mayor Nenshi.
Yeah.
And I also took the time to meet with Mayor Iveson in Edmonton. Now, I know Mayor Iveson was quoted the other day of saying only Mr. Lakasik and I met with him and the other candidate didn't. But I took the time to meet with them, and I'm the only one in the race actually with municipal experience, as you rightly pointed out, with 9 years on city council. And I know that when Mayor Nenshi and Mayor Iveson and the other mayors, Reeves, and councillors across Alberta say to the provincial government, we need more, that they're just doing their job well. And I compliment them on that. I even compliment Mayor Nenshi for kicking us around a little bit on that because he's just supporting Albertans. And what I told him and Mayor Iveson is I agree, we do need to give the municipalities more money as we can afford it. I know they would prefer, a big dollar promise, and I know they're asking for it for the right reasons, but I also said to them, I've got the experience, I understand the municipal issues, and I will be willing to sit down with those municipalities and talk about this in a serious way. And I also said, I'm also willing to look at legislation for big cities, as well as legislation for some of the rural areas for their unique needs. During my time on City Council, of course, I spent 8 years with the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association, dealing with the provincial government on needs for funding, needs for legislation, needs for different authorities for things. So I genuinely believe that they're asking for the right things, and I want to help them get them as Premier.
But other than the money, they're looking for long-term commitment and more powers.
Yeah, and you know what? And there's probably some areas where they can have more authority, but we need to talk about that. And one example that the Calgary's mayor talked to me about was on an environmental issue, that the city felt like they had the knowledge, the people, the expertise, and the ability to solve a problem, but the authority rested with the province, and they had to wait years to get authority to fix what they knew how to fix on day one. Now, there's probably that in a few other areas that we probably can't fix. And there's other areas that we can negotiate together, and I'll be happy to have that conversation.
Let's go back to the race now. There were some, mudslinging and comments were made by each other, right? Mm-hmm. And how it started with the free membership. One candidate was giving the free membership. First he denied it, then he admitted that. I think you were trying to get the answer that when did he start it or when did he approve it. Did you get your answer, by the way?
Well, yeah, actually, Mr. Prentice, his campaign team said that giving away memberships was a bad thing and they would never do it. And then Mr. Prentice himself came out and said, no, they're all wrong. Giving away memberships is a good thing, and I support it. And I of course have said the opposite. I've said giving away memberships is a bad thing. The way to build up our party and our government is to sell memberships and bring people in that are committed to our party. And by giving them away, it actually sets the value of our party at zero. And frankly, I believe it's vote buying, and I've said that for weeks now. So, and again, what makes me happy is when people go to vote, there's a clear distinction between one candidate that thinks it's a good idea to give away memberships, and then there's my campaign that thinks it's a good idea to sell memberships. And I think, Albertans that have a membership now can look at that and make a decision knowing the difference between the candidates' positions.
And then another issue I think you were not agreeing to, I think it was setting the term limits.
That's another candidate's policy that I think I have said, you know what, the only people that I trust to decide who sits in the Legislative Assembly are Alberta voters. Only Alberta voters should decide who sits in the Legislative Assembly. The ultimate entitlement, the definition of entitlement, is someone sitting in the Legislative Assembly who thinks they can decide who sits there with them. Albertans get to make that decision. I trust Albertans to make that decision.
ਪਿਛਲੇ 10 ਸਾਲਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਮਿਠਾਈਆਂ ਦੀ ਮਿਠਾਸ ਨਾਲ ਤੇ ਕਮਾਲ ਦੇ ਚਟਪਟੇ ਤੜਕਿਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਕੈਲਗਰੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਵਾਲੇ ਸ਼ਾਨਦਾਰ ਸਵਾਦ ਦਾ ਅਹਿਸਾਸ ਕਰਵਾ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਬੀਕਾਨੇਰ ਸਵੀਟਸ ਐਂਡ ਰੈਸਟੋਰੈਂਟਸ। ਘਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਵੇ ਕੋਈ ਛੋਟੀ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਜਾਂ ਵੱਡਾ ਫੰਕਸ਼ਨ, ਘਰ ਵਰਗੇ ਸਵਾਦ ਲਈ ਕੈਟਰਿੰਗ ਕਰਵਾਓ ਜਾਂ ਲੰਚ ਬਫੇ ਲਈ ਆਓ। 200 ਮਹਿਮਾਨਾਂ ਤੱਕ ਦੀ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਲਈ ਹਾਲ ਦਾ ਵੀ ਇੰਤਜ਼ਾਮ ਹੈ। ਕਾਲ ਕਰੋ 403 568 5555 403 568 5555।
We hear that Mr. Prentice is the front runner. Let's go to the last leadership race. I think somehow the membership list was leaked to the media and they did their own poll, and then that poll came up. So that's how they came up with who's the front runner. How this idea came up that Jim Prentice is the front runner, because no polls were done. Nobody knew how the membership base is.
You know what? It's fiction. Right now the score is 0-0-0 because nobody's voted for anybody yet.
So it'll start tomorrow in the morning?
It starts tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock. And you know what? And again, I think there's a clear decision. I've always said, the best predictor of future performance is past performance. And when you talk about past performance, I'm very proud that in the last week, of course, the Taxpayers Federation said they didn't have any trouble with my expenses, both of my time at City Council and my time at the provincial government. They certainly had issues with other people's expenses. I know they talked with Mr. Prentice about short and long haul flights where there was issues. And these are the kind of problems that got us in trouble in the first place, why we're having an election right now. Again, I'm happy that there's a clear distinction to be made. I'm happy I was able to bring forward policies that I'll balance the budget. I want all Albertans to know, and your watchers to know, that if I'm Premier, if they want to contact the Premier's office, they will not need to go through a mediator or a third party. They'll just be able to contact the Premier's office. It's something I want to be accessible as a Premier, and they won't have to get permission from some other person to talk to the Premier's office. They'll just be able to approach us, and we'll do our very best to talk to everybody that thinks they need attention from the Premier's office.
So let's say we have an election and we have a result day after tomorrow, and you win the election.
Yes.
You're going to be the Premier, right?
That would be a good result.
Yeah. After the campaign started, the whole caucus, like more than 50 out of 57, let's say the whole caucus didn't support you and the other candidate, Thomas Luzak. So you are going to deal with them, though, anyhow. You are going to form a new cabinet, or you're going to look for a new people. Are you ready to call a new just general election?
No, I won't call a general election right away. The general election is scheduled in 2016, and if I'm Premier, that's when we'll have the general election. And I will say this. In the last couple of times, the person that won the Premier's job had little or no support from the caucus. So there's no reason why that can't happen. But I will do some things different. I know the last Premier lost some support from caucus over time, and I'm going to take a page out of what I understand is Brian Mulroney's playbook, who, as I understand it, when he was Prime Minister, every week he would have breakfast, lunch, or coffee with 5 or 6 of his private members out of his caucus to make sure that he got to listen to them to find out what they were hearing from their bosses, what was important. And as I've said, 4.1 million Albertans will be my boss, and also that Prime Minister Mulroney could tell those people what he thought was important, and they could have a respectful discussion. I intend to follow that model to make sure that all members of our government, of our caucus, feel included, get a chance to participate in the decision-making process, whether it's policy, whether it's legislation, or just general decisions, and make them feel part of the team. And I think that will help me to keep caucus working together, pulling together, and serving Albertans as a team, because we can only serve 4.1 million bosses as a team. And I want to include everybody in the decision-making process. So why? Because Albertans chose them by electing them. So I need to respect that as leader and make sure that they are included in the decision-making.
And, I think every day we're hearing the new news that some other cabinet minister was involved in this and this. Will you call an audit, though, or call public inquiry, maybe?
No, I don't think I'm planning on doing that, but I'll tell you what I will do is I will set very strict rules down. Again, I'm proud of the fact that I'm the only candidate that the Taxpayers Federation has no problem with their expenses. And I will deal with those issues the way I did as a minister. I had simple rules: no expensive hotel rooms, no first-class flights, no eating at the most expensive restaurant in town. You know what? We can live pretty good without having the best. And I think Albertans, when we're spending Albertans' money, we need to spend it carefully. We can have our people travel safely, stay in a decent, comfortable room, eat well without spending the most money possible. It's not difficult. We just have to make sure that's the new standard. And if I'm Premier, my pledge is to make sure everybody's expense accounts are boring. And I'm not saying there won't, as mine have been, and I won't say that there won't be any problems, but I can tell you people that persistently or repeatedly have expenses that aren't boring won't be around, or they certainly won't be around in cabinet anymore.
But if they made mistakes, let's say, and more news come out when you are a premier, you think you will ask them to pay back?
You know what? I'll set a new standard, and there will be repercussions. So, and the people that do not live up to Albertan standards certainly won't be in cabinet. And
what will be the size of the cabinet?
It'll be a lot smaller than it is now. A lot smaller. I don't know what the right number is.
It's 30 now, let's say.
Yeah,
30.
well, you know what? It's not a hard number, in the neighborhood of 18. And that's believe me, it might be a few more, a few less, but I'll give you a general ballpark so that your people watching will know it's going to be a lot smaller cabinet than it is now.
So it depends on the result that you're going to stay or not in the politics.
Well, I'm going to stay.
Going to stay?
I'm going to stay. There's no doubt about that. There's another big difference in this contest. I am going to stay and serve Albertans whether I win or lose the leadership. As I understand it, Mr. Prentice is only going to stay if he wins. So, your viewers can make a decision on who's more committed to Alberta, knowing that.
Well, he was sitting on the same chair you're sitting yesterday. Like, he was sitting here, I asked him the same question. I think he's on the leave of absence from CIBC, and he didn't give a clear answer he's going to stay or not. So, in all fairness to you, I appreciate that you said you will stay.
I will stay.
Yeah.
I'm staying. If Albertans will have me, I'm staying. And the other candidate has a job he hasn't fully quit yet in Toronto. So, what can I tell you?
So, at the end, what do you want to tell our callers? Like, the voting is going to start tomorrow at 6 a.m. and will continue till for another 36 hours, I guess. So, there are members. Some has bought the membership from you. Some have bought from the other candidate. Some had got the free membership. What is your message to them?
My message is this is an important election. This election is only necessary because of ethical and trust lapses. You want to elect a new premier with a strong track record of ethical behavior, of controlling their expenses, of service to Albertans, and commitment to Alberta. And I guess what I'm saying to your people watching is I am that candidate, and not just because I say so, because that's the actual track record that other people say. So this is pretty important. And Alberta's a leader in Canada. I need to work hard to get the pipelines built. Need to work hard to make sure that we further process as much as we can both our energy resources and our agricultural resources. We got big improvements to make to healthcare and education, even though our education system is one of the best in the world. But there's so much work to do. We really need to focus on doing the work and not focus on spending scandals and travel. And again, so I would say to your people, pick the candidate that's likely to not have problems that way. And I think that my track record indicates I'm that candidate.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. We wish you the luck.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to be here, and best luck to Chakde TV. Did I say that right?
Yeah, so after you get
Okay.
elected, then we can talk about more serious issues and talk to the Premier, actually.
And I will, as very few promises I'd say if I get elected Premier, I will come back and sit on this couch in this spot and we'll talk again. How's that?
Sure, we will. And we'll look for that day.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
very much for joining
Thank you
us.
so much. Really
you.
appreciate this.
ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਅੱਜ ਹੋਈ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੁੱਖ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੁੱਦਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਗੱਲ ਹੋਈ ਉਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਿਕ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਸੂਬੇ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਕੋਈ ਵਿਚੋਲਗੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ। ਲੋਕਾਂ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਚੁਣੇ ਗਏ ਲੀਡਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਹਾਜ਼ਰ ਰਹਿਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ। ਐਜੂਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਯਾਨੀ ਕਿ ਸਿੱਖਿਆ ਦੇ ਮੁੱਦੇ ਤੇ ਰਿਕ ਨਾਲ ਹੋਈ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਜੇ ਉਹ ਐਲਬਰਟਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੀਸੀ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰਧਾਨ ਤੇ ਐਲਬਰਟਾ ਸੂਬੇ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰ ਯਾਨੀ ਕਿ ਮੁੱਖ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਬਣਦੇ ਹਨ ਤਾਂ ਐਲਬਰਟਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਵੇਂ ਸਕੂਲ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਖੋਲ੍ਹੇ ਜਾਣਗੇ। ਪਰ ਸਕੂਲਾਂ ਦੀ ਗਿਣਤੀ ਬਾਰੇ ਪੁੱਛੇ ਜਾਣ 'ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰ ਬਣਨ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਐਜੂਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਬੋਰਡ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਕੇ ਹੀ ਉਹ ਇਸ ਨਿਰਣੇ 'ਤੇ ਪਹੁੰਚ ਸਕਣਗੇ ਕਿ ਐਲਬਰਟਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਹੋਰ ਸਕੂਲਾਂ ਦਾ ਨਿਰਮਾਣ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਐਲਬਰਟਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਬਣੇ ਸਕੂਲਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਹੋਰ ਵਧੀਆ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਕੀ ਕੁਝ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ। ਸਿੱਖਿਆ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਸਿਹਤ ਵਿਭਾਗ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ 'ਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਸਿਹਤ ਵਿਭਾਗ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪ੍ਰਣਾਲੀ ਨੂੰ ਸੌਖਾ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਿਰਣਾਇਕ ਫੈਸਲੇ ਲੈਣ ਦਾ ਤਰੀਕਾ ਸਪਸ਼ਟ ਅਤੇ ਤੇਜ਼ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਐਲਬਰਟਾ ਸੂਬੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਕਰਮਚਾਰੀਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰਣਾਲੀ ਦਾ ਹਿੱਸਾ ਬਣਾਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ। ਰਿਕ ਨੇ ਅਸੈਂਬਲੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਬਦਲਾਅ ਬਾਰੇ ਪੁੱਛੇ ਜਾਣ 'ਤੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਬਦਲਾਵ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਸਲਾਹ ਤੋਂ ਬਿਨਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇਗਾ। ਇਸ ਫੈਸਲੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਸੁਝਾਅ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਅਸੈਂਬਲੀ ਨੂੰ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਕੀਮਤੀ ਵੋਟਾਂ ਦਾ ਯੋਗਦਾਨ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਇਹ ਪੁੱਛੇ ਜਾਣ 'ਤੇ ਕਿ ਕੀ ਉਹ ਜਿੱਤਣ ਜਾਂ ਹਾਰਨ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਇਸ ਪੋਲੀਟਿਕਸ ਯਾਨੀ ਕਿ ਰਾਜਨੀਤੀ ਦਾ ਸਫ਼ਰ ਜਾਰੀ ਰੱਖਣਗੇ ਜਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਫਰਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਜਿੱਤਣ ਜਾਂ ਹਾਰਨ, ਉਹ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਸੇਵਾ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਹੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਰਹਿਣਗੇ। ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਪੀਸੀ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੀ ਮੈਂਬਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਵੋਟਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਿੱਸਾ ਲੈ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਹੋਰ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਲੈਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ www.ricmciver.com 'ਤੇ ਲੌਗਇਨ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ 1844-611-1742 1844 611 1742 ਨੰਬਰ 'ਤੇ ਕਾਲ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕੰਟੈਕਟ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਈਮੇਲ ਦੇ ਰਾਹੀਂ। ਇਸ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜਨ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਫੇਸਬੁੱਕ 'ਤੇ ਫੋਲੋ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਅਤੇ YouTube 'ਤੇ ਸਾਡਾ ਚੈਨਲ ਵੀ ਸਬਸਕ੍ਰਾਈਬ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਇਸੇ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੋਂ ਇਜਾਜ਼ਤ। ਧੰਨਵਾਦ।